goodness, Urban Meyer, football season's taking off. Here we are back with our second episode of Urban's Take. Are you fired up about this?
I am. There's some gigantic games coming out. I hope we never lose that, Tim. I just worry that some of these great games will start to go away and everybody plays the soft schedules because all that matters is a playoff. I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I hope we continue to see some great games early in the season.
Hey, we're going to get into a couple of those real quick, just because the quarterback matchups this weekend, a couple of them are really outstanding. LSU at Florida State in Orlando, and in North Carolina, South Carolina meeting in Charlotte, in those stadiums. But I wanted to get through this because you've been in these shoes before, this seat before. Ryan Day finally picked his starting quarterback, but he says in Kyle McCord. But he says Devin Brown's going to play some too in the opener. And just as a head coach, clearly that guy is stepping into a Ferrari, the way I look at the Ohio State offense these days. And but as a head coach, when you make that call finally, does a big weight come off your shoulders, or does more weight come on knowing you've picked a first-time starter no matter what?
Well, it all depends on the separation between 1 and 2. If there's a slight separation, it still weighs heavy on you that you did the right thing because you care about those players. That's the most important position, I think, in all of sports. So, yeah, you have to be right. The good news is, and I think the Buckeye fans need to appreciate this, you have two. Ryan Day and Corey Dennis now, they're named someone that's done a better job.
Yeah.
Coach has done a better job recruiting players, developing players than those two. So they're in great hands. Like you said, it's a Ferrari. They have 4 running backs they feel good about. They have the best wide receiver group in America. If the offensive line can hang in there, because I know it's going to be some growing pains. The good thing is they got 3 teams. Indiana's not the Indiana of old. I know they have a bunch of transfers. I'm anxious to see what they look like. But there was a time where Indiana would hit you right in the face. I don't know if that's at Indiana right now. So I feel good everything I hear about Kyle McCord. And, I hear people say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. I don't agree with that. Yeah. If you say you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 2 quarterbacks, which you know what? That is better than one.
Yeah.
It's football, violent game. If something happens, you jog that number 2 and you feel good about it.
I was going to say these 2 guys were both 5-star, and they were both considered can't-miss prospects, in their respective years. Kyle McCord 3 years ago, Devin Brown 2 years ago. And, I wanted to ask you this, though, because I asked Ryan about this at the press conference this week. There's that fine line you got to walk between patience and urgency, especially at Ohio State, because you're expected to win every game. You're expected to be pretty good coming out of the gate, right? But, you handled first-time starting quarterbacks before. How do you know when you're giving them too much leash and maybe not tugging on it a little bit harder? You understand what I'm saying? Because they're going to make mistakes. I mean, that happens, right?
Yeah, confidence is so critical. And I go back to Cardale Jones' first start was a Big Ten championship game. And you think the first play of the game was a little sprint out to his right. He's right-handed, throw it to his right. Let him, and he told me after the game, he said, I needed that just to start to breathe. And there's things at quarterback like any position, but a quarterback 1 through 5, the easiest to the most difficult, and make sure you ease them into it. For example, the first thing you can do is have a great running game. Let that quarterback calm down, hand the ball. They have good running backs, pound the ball a little bit. The second thing is you can break the pocket and give him just an isolation read out there. Take away the whole field.
Yeah.
And then third thing you can do is the quick game. That also, get the ball out of his hand fast. The longer you hold on to the ball, bad things can happen. And then you have the RPO game and the play action game. The thing you want to stay away from is full field reads, holding on to the ball. Don't do that. If you go back to that, what we did with Cardale Jones, we had a good running game with Zeke Elliott. Then we threw the ball on the outside. But the other thing you can do is just take isolation shots down the field. If you miss it, it's 2nd down and 10.
Yeah.
You don't throw the ball, and it's kind of a good story, but don't you dare throw the ball down the middle of the field early in the game with a young quarterback. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Because you want to destroy confidence. Those are called, a lot of times he's fired up, the adrenaline's flowing, and he throws it high down the middle of the field. It's interception. So yeah. Ryan's smart enough to do that. I'm anxious to see 3 of the top 4 teams in America got new quarterbacks.
Yeah.
This is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, like Carson Beck at Georgia, but for example, but I wanted to ask you this. I mean, here's Alabama sitting here. Nick Saban did not reveal who his starting quarterback was this week. He's going into that opener against Middle Tennessee State with same guys we were talking about 3 months ago. Jalen Milroe, guy you really liked a couple of times last year, but he kind of showed his newness, so to speak, in place of Bryce Young. But Ty Simpson and the transfer from Notre Dame, Tyler Buckner, who this time a year ago started for Notre Dame against Ohio State. But what's your read on Alabama? Nick Saban not even releasing a depth chart, period, much less a depth chart at quarterback. Is this one of those years? I mean, explain what you're thinking about what he's doing.
Well, I don't want to read too much into it, but I would say that there hasn't been a guy separate himself. And if there is, you have to name him as a starter. But they're also playing Middle Tennessee State. That one concerns me a little bit more than Ohio State. The one thing about Alabama, when Alabama was the best team in America, they had the best wide receivers in the country.
Yeah.
I didn't see that last year. I know they're young. I know they're talented. They're highly recruited. But you didn't feel when they beat Ohio State in the national title, that was as good a wide receiver group as I've ever seen. That was Ohio, a lot like Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that last year. So the one thing that great quarterbacks have in common is great receivers. And Kyle McCord, Devin Brown's got great receivers. I'm anxious to see if Alabama's improved from. I know they're talented. They got some young stallions at receiver, but that didn't look the same to me last year.
Yeah. And last year as the year went on, there were some great players emerged, and several of those quarterbacks are facing off this weekend. I want to get you number one. Florida State's hosting LSU in Orlando, and then North Carolina and South Carolina are facing off in Charlotte. Florida State hosting LSU in Orlando reminds me of a saying that John Cooper, former coach at Ohio State, used to say. It's like playing Notre Dame in Rome, right? But a neutral site. But the bottom line is, you've got the Jordan Travis kid at Florida State who kind of came on as the year went on last year, made some plays, and then Jaden Daniels, for LSU. And LSU, and we talked about them a week and a half ago, Urban, that could be a real surprise. I don't know if surprise team's right when you're coming back from winning the SEC West, but that's a hell of a game right out of the gate, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to pick our Final Four on the Big Noon this week, and I'm not quite finished with. I keep watching film and keep reading up on some of the teams. But LSU, they got a fine coach in Brian Kelly. I've coached against LSU. I always tell people they just look different.
Yeah,
they're so talented, and that hasn't stopped. As a matter of fact, they're a very NFL player ratio to the NFL. LSU's right at the top right now. And so that's going to be a very talented team. I pick LSU in this game. I think Jordan Travis and Florida State is still a year away. I think the Florida State team's a year away.
Agreed.
You think about what that coach Norvell has done down at Florida State. They were awful a couple years ago. I had to sometime run it back and say, is that really Florida State we're watching? And you look at them now, that's a good coach, excellent staff, and they got really good players. So it's going to be a close game, but I still like LSU.
Yeah, and you remember last year talking about South Carolina and North Carolina, but you remember last year Spencer Rattler with that ridiculous game against Tennessee. It seemed like every other pass he threw was a touchdown pass, and they just stunned, shocked, and ended up drilling Tennessee and stuff. And he's going against Drake May. No relationship to me because he has an E on the end of his name, but Drake May in North Carolina, and Drake May was what was the MVP of the ACC last year at quarterback. But that's another game that's right out of the chute, man. Is that pressure on coaches? How would you explain playing that kind of competition right out of the chute?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I once again, I hope it doesn't go away because we did a story on Big Noon Kickoff one time when I believe Auburn played Oregon early in the year and Oregon lost. If Oregon would have played a small school, Oregon would have been in the playoffs. So I hope, I came out on, I think it was Colin Coward or somewhere. I think the NCAA should mandate you play one Power 5, one middle-of-the-road Power 5, and a smaller school if you want, to keep the interest and keep, to make it fair, because some of these schedules are ridiculous. The missing link in North Carolina is Phil Longo, the offense coordinator. He left. He's now in Wisconsin. Yeah. He's got an incredible track record. I know him well. He's a football savant. That's all he talks about is football. I just spoke to him the other day, and he loves up in Wisconsin. But Drake May is a great player. But I'm anxious to see how much the play calling changes. how much the offense, if it slips at all, with a new coordinator.
Hey, you saw Sam Hartman make his debut for Notre Dame last week in Dublin, Ireland against Navy. And what did you take from that game, Urban? I mean, he had a great day. I think he threw 4 touchdown passes, but he had a great game against Navy. You understand what I'm saying? And you and I both know when Ohio State won the 2014 national championship with you, y'all opened against Navy in Baltimore, won that game, but then got upset at home by, I don't know if you got upset, but got beat at home by Virginia Tech and then bounced back. You had a first-year starting quarterback, obviously, in JT Barrett. But what should Notre Dame take from that opening win in Dublin, Ireland, against Navy, which is an awkward team to play?
Well, that's a no-win situation for Notre Dame. I was actually on Lou Holtz's staff, and it was actually horrible for the staff. You know, what the families got to go and fans got to go, and it's, you kidding me, Notre Dame playing in Ireland. But
yeah,
I mean, we were locked in a hole, and you're holding your breath because Navy's one of those teams that, you know, you screw around. I'm not sure that's the same Navy. You know, there's been a transition of the head coach. It's going to take a minute to be back. But the traditional Navy team, you take that thing and you run, and you're happy you won. You played well. Right. We barely beat Navy over there. We barely beat Navy in 2014. I think we were even losing at halftime, or as close at halftime. So take it and run. The quarterback played well. You know, I still am amazed that Notre Dame's got to go to Wake Forest to get a transfer quarterback. That doesn't equate to me. That doesn't. No, he's a great player.
Yeah.
But Notre Dame's got to go recruit them a 5-star, and they should have 1, 2, and 3 excellent quarterback because it's Notre Dame. You should recruit Ohio State, those top blue blood teams. You should be in the mix in every top quarterback in America and get them.
And guess what, Urban? He's in his 6th year. What could you have done with 6 years of like Tim Tebow or something? I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? When Ohio State's got a kid on their, as you know, Tristan Gebbia, transfer from Oregon State. He's basically a coach within that quarterback room, which is led by your son-in-law, Corey Dennis, the quarterback's coach. But he's in his 7th year in college football. That's kind of crazy, isn't it, when you think about it?
Well, I remember Mark Pantoni, the recruiting coordinator at Ohio State, and we would have conversations. The great players leave after 3. If you're really killing it, and I'm not saying they're not great players, but after 3 years, they're gone. Ohio State's quarterbacks are gone after 3 years. It started with Dwayne Haskins. Now, the fact that you have guys who've been there 6 years, obviously that's a little bit of luxury. But once again, Notre Dame, in my opinion, should, and everyone's opinion, you go recruit you the best quarterback in the country, develop them, let him play for 2 years, he goes be a first-round draft pick. For them to get where they have to get, that has to happen.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we're looking here, Spencer Rattler at South Carolina. He left Oklahoma because of Caleb Williams. You got Sam Hartman moving from Wake Forest to Notre Dame. You got Notre Dame starting quarterback against Ohio State last year. Now at Alabama, trying to be its starting quarterback. I don't know.
How about that? And then Tennessee has a guy that I remember standing next to on the sideline, Joe Milton.
Yeah.
And he looked like Cam Newton standing next to me. And I remember grabbing our quarterback coach at the time saying, where is this guy from? And I mean, you talk about a guy that can throw the ball, so he has all the tools, but it is bizarre to see guys just bouncing school to school and starting quarterback here, and now he's starting another place.
Hey, speaking of the football and the big noon kickoff, you guys are going to be in Fort Worth, I think, right? You're going to be on the scene of Coach Prime's debut at Colorado against TCU. And how much are you looking for, except for it being 99 degrees, I think, at kickoff? How much are you looking forward to, like, just seeing what Coach Prime has done, man?
Well, I went to watch him practice about 3 weeks ago, and I was really impressed. I did not expect that. It's the grand experiment. He took over arguably the worst program in the country. They were 1-10 or 1-11 last year. The point differential was one of the worst I've ever seen. It was 500 and some to 100. That means the opponent scored that many more points. It was a terrible team. He comes in and says, "You're a terrible team. I'm getting rid of everybody," and that's what he did. And he's got. When I say grand experiment, Tim, and this is something you're going to have to really watch, all of us. I talked to Bob Stoops, and I had a little text about it, kind of laughing about it. And you were never allowed to just get rid of guys. You couldn't do that. I saw Coach Prime where he said the guys don't like football, and some of their eyes they look dead in their eyes or something. I was thinking, yeah, when you have a takeover team, that's going to happen. But now, if you can just transition your roster like that, which is legal, you know what's going to happen if he wins, which I do. I think he's going to win some games this year. Every AD and every new head coach in the country is going to come in and kick guys off the team. And that's what you have to ask yourself. Is that really good for college football? Because if this experiment works, mark my words, that's going to happen every time someone takes over a downtrodden program.
Absolutely. It's a land of opportunity, but you still have to have the right guy in charge. And, but, I'm looking at Indiana. Ohio State's opening at Indiana. They got 23 transfers from the portal. Indiana does. Ohio State's benefited greatly in this transfer portal era the last several years. Of this year, they've got 6 or 7 guys that are going to play. Some may even start. So it is interesting. You dab your toe in it, and then when it works, you put your whole foot down in there, don't you?
Well, it's interesting. Ohio State needed help at offensive line, and they said, okay, let's get name and likeness. Let's get the transfer portal and go find a starting offensive lineman. They did.
Yeah.
A great athlete. I think it was San Diego State where we got him from.
Josh Simmons.
Yeah, I'm not sitting there saying it's bad. It's great. There's advantages to both, but I just think the grand experiment that CU is going to experience, and I like Deion Sanders. I know him a long time. He was gracious to me to let me spend a whole day in the meetings and everything. They have good players. His son's a really good quarterback. If this works, college football will be different for the rest of our lifetime.
I agree. It's been building to this literally. Now, is it really going to work in the grand scheme? Last thing before you go, back to the Ohio State at Indiana game. If I'm Tom Allen, if I'm Indiana, they've got Matt Guarini, former analyst for Ohio State there, who's worked under Jim Knowles many times for many years at Duke, and then ended up coming to Ohio State as an analyst. And he's now their co-defensive coordinator. You got 3 new starters on the offensive line, including the center. You've got a brand new starting quarterback. Do you just blitz the hell out of Ohio State? What do you do? I mean, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, what should Ohio State, I guess, anticipate right off the get-go there in Memorial Stadium?
Well, the problem with blitzing is you have to play soft coverage or man coverage behind it. And with the receiver talent that we have at Ohio State, I would try to keep the ball in front of us. I'd force that quarterback to make some decisions and not help you make decisions by just, taking a one-on-one shot to Marvin Harrison or that other great group of receivers they have. So I would anticipate that Indiana would play tough, play hard, which one thing about Indiana, man, they don't go down swinging. Now, I'm not sure this is the same Indiana that we experienced over the years, but I'd keep the ball in front of you.
Yeah. Hey, one last quickie as a bonus for me. Ryan Day, it looks more like he's going to call plays. He had talked about stepping away from that. Once you get closer to a season and you got a brand new starting quarterback and you got 3 new starters on your offensive line, I'm not surprised that he's going to be calling plays. Are you?
I'm not. When you're so good at something, it's hard to give it up. I think he has great trust in his offensive staff, Ryan Hartline in particular. I know a lot of his week day-to-day, he's going to hand off to his guys. The one thing is, and he said this to me many times, and he believes it, that, you got to be the head coach. It's going to be hard to be the primary. I think he's going to rely on his staff more than he ever has. They've been together for a long time. Hartline, Corey Dennis. They feel really good about Justin Fry. Keenan is the tight end coach. Keenan Bailey's been there for a long time. So he's got his little posse of people. And I've seen them, and I've been there. When you walk in that room and it's not like you're walking in and there's a whole new offense on the board. You're like, wait a minute. That's happened to me before. When I walk in, I'm like, wait a minute, what is that? If I walk in and it's our stuff, with the puzzle moved around, I feel so much better. And that's the way Ryan does feels. That's the way Ryan Day feels now.
Can I ask you one last thing, Urban? I know it's a bonus for me, but I watched Swamp Kings like everybody else did. Calling plays is about 0.5% of what a head coach does, if in fact he even calls plays and stuff. And it was stunning in many respects how you're consistently working with personnel. A head coach is more than anything else a personnel finder, director kind of guy, right? I mean, as you watch that, are you even taken aback sometimes by how much stress y'all were under, you were under, and you kind of found your way out of it. You understand what I'm saying? But I mean, you said last week, it gave you chill bumps a little bit watching some of it, but should one man be under that much stress?
Well, I didn't handle it well. Some coaches, they kind of water off a duck's back, I heard, or something like that. And I tried. I tried everything for my entire career. I feel that wasn't just Florida. That was Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Remember, we lost to Miami, Ohio, and Ben Roethlisberger one time. And I swear I didn't think the sun was going to come up the next day. I stayed up all night just trying to figure out what happened. How did we and it's Bowling Green versus Miami, Ohio. And so when you're hired as a head coach, number one, you have to develop and implement a culture. Number two, you have to have talent acquisition. And you better spend all your time doing that. Obviously you got schematics and offensive play calling, defensive play calling. I love special teams. But all those other 30 things, you take away. Ryan's a great play caller. He's been throwing the ball to first-round draft picks for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Take away those first-round draft picks and, Ryan be the first one. He's also been throwing it with first-round quarterbacks and for the talent level that you have. So,
yeah.
Culture, develop and implement. Number two is talent acquisition. And right now, the inner workings of Ohio State recruiting staff and their coaching staff is as good as there is.
But, speaking of you, though, when the thing that got me about watching you in those things, because I've known you since you were like 21 years old and stuff, but it's hard to switch your brain off, isn't it? I mean, because like you just said, if you just lost a game, all you have is questions and thoughts about how to fix it. How urgently can we get this? I mean, it never stops, does it?
When I was a head coach, Tim, I never took a day off.
Yeah.
Now there was times we'd go away for 3 days, maybe 4 days.
Yeah.
But I never one time took a day off. And that means I would get up in the morning and I had my routine of recruiting. Even though, when you're supposed to get away, I never got away. I was there. I mean, no, I would try to discipline myself for family, et cetera, et cetera. But that was one of the reasons why, I hate to use the word burnout, but that's one of the reasons why when you're burning that hot constantly, at some point you got to let it go. And I never was able to do that. Yeah.
You either let it go or it gets you, and that's the deal. Well, Urban, I'm glad you're still talking to me on Urban's Take here. I enjoy these. I think you know that, and hope you do too. But one other last thought before we head into this true opening weekend of college football.
Yeah, it's just I know the game's under attack with NIL and transfer portal, but then again, I just, man, the fans. I know as I'm a fan, to watch what these players and coaches do and the greatest game of all in front of the greatest crowds. I can't wait to get down to TCU and watch, Coach Prime hustle his team out there and then watch the Buckeyes and watch this LSU Florida State game. Enjoy this great game.
Yeah. I was going to say a friend of ours, Pete Thamel, you've known him for a long time. He said on this podcast several weeks ago, the game's never been better on the field and probably never more chaotic off the field. And that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, the shelf life of a coach was tough. It's never been as tough.
Yeah.
I witness it because I have family members coaching, and it is 24. I mean, I was 24/7 anyways, but I mean, it's borderline insanity how hard you have to recruit your players and always looking for other talent.
Well, hey, this time next week, we're going to be talking about maybe the best matchup of the early season, Texas going to Alabama. That's going to be a harbinger for both of those programs. And I'm looking forward to it, Urban. Are you?
I can't wait.